Hey everyone, it's Granny Wendy, and I was thinking of reading some Mother Goose nursery rhymes today. Let's see. So, one that I was gonna read is this one. There's a horse and a man. Well, let me read it. It's called If Wishes Were Horses. If wishes were horses, beggars would ride. If turnips were watches, I would wear one by my side. And if ifs and ands were pots and pans, there'd be no work for tinkers. It's kind of a silly rhyme, which they usually are. A lot of them just don't make sense because they were written a long time ago. Anyways, let me try and figure this one out. So, who likes to wish about things? I like to wish for a big a pony or a bunch of money or an ice cream cone. We wish a lot of things, huh? Well, this says if wishes were horses. Okay, wishes were horses. All right. Beggars would ride. Okay, so then someone who begs for things, they would be able to ride horses if the wishes were horses. Sure. Okay, then it says if turnips were watches. A turnip is like some kind of a vegetable that grows kind of like potatoes. It grows in the ground, but they're vegetables. And watches, like a watch that you wear on your wrist to tell time with. So it says, if turnips were watches, okay, I would wear one by my side. Okay, if turnips were watches, I'd wear one by my side. So that means they would wear a turnip on his side, maybe on his wrist on the side, because that's where people put watches at. And they'd wear a turnip if it was a watch. Okay. And ifs, like when we say if, so if and if, and ands, when we say and, if, or and, those are words we use a lot. So if ifs and ands were pots and pans, pots and pans are what you cook in. You make stuff and cook on the stove, and that's a pot or a pan. You cook in them on the stove to make food. So, if ifs and ands were pots and pans, they'd be no work for tinkers. Well, what's a tinker? I don't know what a tinker is. Do you? You don't? You don't either? No one knows what a tinker is. I don't either. But maybe it's a kind of a person because it says there'd be no work for tinkers, so people work, and so maybe a tinker is a kind of a person that works. So let's say it all together. If wishes were horses, beggars would ride. If turnips were watches, I would wear one by my side. And if ifs and ands were pots and pans, there'd be no work for tinkers. Okay, so we'll say it all again. Ready? If wishes were horses and beggars would ride. Okay, I messed up. Let me say it again. If wishes were horses, beggars would ride. If turnips were watches, I would wear one by my side. If ifs and ands were pots and pans, there'd be no work for tinkers. Oh, pots and pans. Tinkers, that could be people who tink, 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 make, like you might get a spoon or like a pin and go pink, pink, pink on a pot and a pan. Maybe that's what they mean by tink, someone who tinkers on a pot and pan with like a big spoon. I just thought about that. I don't know. There'd be no work for tinkers. Okay, here we go. Let's just say it all again. If wishes were horses, beggars would ride. If turnips were watches, I'd wear one by my side. And if ifs and ands were pots and pans, there'd be no work for tinkers. One more time. If wishes were horses, beggars would ride. If turnips were watches, I'd wear one by my side. If ifs and ands were pots and pans, there'd be no work for tinkers. Da-da, da-da-da-da. That's it for that one. Let's do another one. This one's called To Market. See these two kids, a boy and a girl, and there's a pig. And they're just kind of running there. Running like chasing a pig or something. Let's read this one. It's called To Market, and it's about that picture. To market, to market. A market is like a store or a place where you go buy stuff. So that's what they say to market, to market. Maybe they're running to the market. To buy a fat pig. So they're running to the market to buy a big fat pig. Okay. Home again, jiggity jig. So now they're running home with the pig. So they're going home again, jiggity jig. Jiggity jig is just something fun to say. I think that rhymes with home again. And then let's see, to market, to buy a fat hog. A hog is the same thing as a pig. Hogs and pigs, I think they're the same thing. So they're going to the market again to buy a fat hog, which is the same thing as a pig, I think. Home again, jiggity jog. Jiggity jog rhymes with buy a fat hog. So hog and jog, they rhyme. They sound the same. And pig and jig sound the same, so there's rhyming words. Okay? Rhyme means it sounds the same. Okay. Here's another one. This one says, to market. Now what are they going to market for? To buy a plum bun. A plum bun? What's that? Well, a plum is, it's a fruit that you pick from the tree and you eat it. So plums are fruits that you pick from the tree and eat. Okay. And then a bun, well, a bun is like, kind of like bread. It's a roll or a bun. And you eat them like maybe at dinner time. It's just a round piece of bread, and you stick butter in it and eat it with your dinner. It's called a dinner roll or a dinner bun. So, a plum bun, so maybe someone made buns out of plums. So I think that'd be more for dessert because it's sweet. It's made out of fruit. So anyways, that's just what I'm guessing, a plum bun. Okay, and then the last one says, home again, market is done. So bun and done, they rhyme. So after they bought the plum bun from the market, they went home again and their market was done. So I guess that means they're done going shopping at the market. So they got their fat pig and they bought their fat hog and they bought a plum bun, probably for dessert, and then they're done shopping at the market. So let's say the whole nursery rhyme together. To market, to buy a fat pig. Home again, jiggity jig. To market, to buy a fat hog. Home again, jiggity jog. To market, to buy a plum bun. Home again, market is done. So their day at the market is all done. They did all their buying. Okay, let's do it again. It's called to market. We'll say it again together. To market, to buy a fat pig. To market, to buy a fat hog. Home again, jiggity jog. To market, to buy a plum bun. Home again, market is done. Did I skip a line? I think I did. Let's say it again. To market, to buy a fat pig. Home again, jiggity jig. That's what I forgot. Okay. To market, to buy a fat hog. Home again, jiggity jog. To market, to buy a plum bun. Home again, market is done. One more time and then we'll be done. Here we go. To market, to buy a fat pig. Home again, jiggity jig. To market, to buy a fat hog. Home again, jiggity jog. To market, to buy a plum bun. Home again, market is done. That's it. I think that's it for the day, kids, or for at least our nursery rhymes. Mother Goose nursery rhymes. Okay, that's it for now, kids. We'll do another one in a day or two. Bye. See you next time.